this.
Okay, guy.
Whenever I'm on and I pop up, now I just order, hit record, start right now. Are you sure you? No, start right now. Because otherwise I'm going to say something that I'm not going to be able to repeat. Really? Perfect.
Good. We're on. So he was, I thought that guy was tough as shit, and I was super impressed with how he, like, just popped up from the bottom. Like, you'd get him on the bottom, and he'd just, like, spring up from the bottom, and then I was like...
Yeah, I mean, I really think that because us three, train, I would say right now, at least speak for myself, train almost 95% gi, and have so in the last, like, 5 years. There was a period of time where I, for sure, was more balanced, even a time where I was Nogi more. And there are benefits and style influences that you get from Nogi, especially MMA. And one of them is don't be stuck on bottom. And so he has that sense of, I'm going to get on top. Like, if I'm on bottom, I'm losing. And I think that's like one of the things that you get from organically from wrestling, and it's more instinctual, which is why I always say, like, wrestling is the art of be the guy on motherfucking top, no matter back arching motherfucking what.
Yeah.
And that energy is so not with jiu-jitsu.
But that's the way that when you were training us, my crop of black belts through all the colored belts, you trained us that way.
Yes.
That we're always trying to come on top. Your guard is not just to be like hanging out and recovering. Like, yeah, we're looking for submissions, but we're also constantly making the other person have to hold us on the bottom. And if they're not holding us on the bottom, we're coming up.
Your guard's late.
That was how our training specifically for like competition and thinking straight, right? It all comes from thinking straight. Nobody wants to be on their back in the street. You want to come up, right? So.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I've kind of lost that desire to like kick everybody's ass in every round that I do. You know what I mean? And I more like roll with somebody and I'm like, what's unique about this person's game? And I like want to know what that is and then like try to play it.
Yeah.
So when I was rolling with him, I became like super sensitive about like being on the bottom. I was like, oh, I shouldn't be on the bottom. Like every time I found myself like retreating to the bottom, I was like, oh, I shouldn't be down here. And I'd be like, oh, he's going to be, this was MMA, I was like thinking in my head, like I'd be getting killed right now.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It like changed my like perspective.
Whether you're thinking straight or actually like adding slaps, what I call the jits with hits, which is different from MMA sparring. The jits with hits is you're still focused on the art of the jiu-jitsu. And it's usually one person more oriented than the other. Is how do I come up with a jiu-jitsu solution to a striking problem? Not an MMA solution, not a mixed martial arts answer, but how do I do my same jiu-jitsu, the style that I want, while the person can also hit me? And I think that like is, and it's one of those things you guys hear me say all the time. I think when somebody does start hitting you when we're grappling, you kind of instantly kick over in that mode, but you also become acutely aware of bad habits when it comes to the application of the street, right? Like really bad habits. Like I was saying last night, like one of the best lessons, like dogs are out there. I call it a spiritual jiu-jitsu epiphany. I was a seasoned blue belt. I came from a wrestling background. I'm pretty good, but I was expressly told from my then mentors, which were Hoist, Hegan, and Hickson, is don't expose your back. And in wrestling, we constantly go to bottom quarter. But judo does that. And when you're not adding strikes, that's a pretty safe spot, rocking up on bottom. And I was rolling with Hickson as a blue belt. And when he was passing my guard, I turned over to bottom quarter. And for a second I paused, and he, not meanly, like as an instructor, he slapped me right in the back of my head twice. He goes, "What are you doing? Where's your guard? Come on, Chris, where's your guard?" And I instantly went, boom, and I had a guard. And I'm like, it just like, it all clicked.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, wrestling, the sport, is so boxed in to not think about being punched or kicked. And the jiu-jitsu was so not boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
It was the least amount of cultural and institutional rules out of all the arts at that time. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, the sport was growing and starting to add rules. And that's where I like realized that, like, if you went back to like 1968, Japanese judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu were almost the same thing.
Uh-huh.
And then the Japanese, because to make an Olympic sport and all that, and to export it, started adding rules. Uh-huh. And those rules were engineered for two reasons. One was to preserve the art. What is judo? It's the art of the upright clinch and throw. The other was to get spectators to want to watch it. And to me, that's the worst reason for any art, is how do we get butts in seats? And I've seen IBJJF try to alter the rules, Taekwondo has, boxing has. For a long while, people didn't want to watch a clinch in boxing. The crowds would go boo, boo, boo. Mm-hmm. And in early UFC, they would have those little thumb things that like viewers would watch and press like, or don't like. They found that people like watching people standing, throwing badly timed haymakers all over the place, and they hated two guys in the guard exchanging rabbit punches. No one wanted to watch that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, that's going to ruin the art. It'll ruin MMA.
Uh-huh.
So they put the timed rounds in, right?
And they added the timed round.
Yeah, so that they don't get stuck in the guard for long periods of time. Yeah. But back to your thing that you were talking about, like I think it's different places where people are in their experience. So Mads, a 30-year-old, highly competitive UFC, guy.
Yep, he's an MMA fighter.
MMA fighter, not UFC. He's in PF. What is it?
He was UFC, PFL now.
He's in PFL. Yeah. So a professional MMA fighter from Denmark, living in Las Vegas, coming over here, the way that he rolls versus, any of us who are kind of like a little bit, I would say we're a little bit more relaxed in our thinking because we're not professional fighters.
I know. No, it was cool. It was a very cool experience for me, I think, because to me, as a guy that trains jiu-jitsu, has a family, does, my job, do all my things, I feel like I couldn't ask for much more out of my experience than be able to like train with somebody like that, who's like a top of the food chain. Yeah. MMA fighting tank, who's my exact same weight.
Yeah.
And 30 years old, like at the peak of his fighting career. And, I'm not kicking his ass by any means, but I had some moments, and then I feel like I gave him a good training, right?
Yeah.
So
and the thing
that's as rad as it gets.
Is for him, who trains almost exclusively Nogi and MMA, we could stick to him.
Yeah.
He's
and
not
it's
used
fun,
to
right?
having his leg grabbing. He's like, damn, I got to come up with I got to go back to my gi training now. Yeah. So
I thought it seemed like it was cool for him to train with someone like me, because I remember at the end of our training, he was like, oh man, like jiu-jitsu is so cool that like a guy that like works a desk job can like control somebody like that and can like submit somebody.
Yeah.
You could tell he was kind of like the antithesis of that thinking, where I'm like, seeing it from a different angle, but it was a good experience.
But that's true that once, these guys put their gi on, it completely slows the game down. It changes things, and that's all we do.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Well, what do you think? Like, I think a lot of people come to jiu-jitsu thinking like, I know, at least for me, my experience was like, I had this notion that I had like zero clue how to fight. and I was like living my life going like, oh man, if I ever had to like protect myself in the streets, I would have no clue what to do. Like I would just be like, whoa.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and then like I came to jiu-jitsu and it was like this like secret sauce that would allow me to like eliminate all of that worry, or at least theoretically, right? And so like I think a lot of people come to jiu-jitsu wanting to like do something that gets them as close as they could be to a real life scenario.
Yes.
And I remember one of my early experiences training asking a black belt like, oh hey, like isn't no-gi like more realistic, you know, than training in the gi? And he was like, oh, so what, you're gonna get in a street fight and then stop and put on some spandex before you start fighting?
Yeah.
I was like, this kind of makes sense. Like you can't practice in clothes, right? Because the clothes are gonna get all ripped up and shredded every time, and so you have to have a durable clothing to wear to practice it.
Yeah,
the
but,
gi makes sense.
I mean, I would say that 90%, I don't know what the math is, but most street altercations, self-defense, the person's wearing clothing.
Yeah.
Most of them. And if it's in the winter, they're wearing a jacket, which is basically a gi jacket.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick one or the other, what's the most realistic? It would probably be the cloth grappling arts, which is why judo, the ippon, wins the fight, because that's preserving the reality of it, that if I body slam you or in a perfectly controlled throw and spike you on your head, that's it. I mean, that's more than an armbar or a knockout,
When
right?
you train with really good judo guys, I feel like, I remember there was this guy from Korea when I was like just starting in judo that was like trying to fuck me up, you know what I mean? And he almost knocked me out with ippon, and I got a concussion.
Oh.
Had to recover and stuff. And like, when you realize what a judo person can do to you, it's like,
It's game over.
oh, you know, if that was on concrete, you'd be dead.
And Greco is the no-gi judo. It preserves the upright clinch and throw.
But when you say like, you could train in the gi, like, didn't you thought no-gi worlds is a purple belt, right? And you won.
Mm-hmm.
And you trained in the gi most.
You know, at that time I did train a lot of no-gi. Yeah, because there were a lot more matches for women in no-gi competition, and gi competition wasn't that popular. Like my first Pan Ams that I did as a blue belt, there were 4 ladies in the division. So that's not a big tournament. But you go to no-gi and they're putting the white belts and the blue belts and the purple belts all in like the same category. Or that IBJJF that I won as a purple belt was blue and purple together. So they would mix them more so with the no-gi steps. And there were no-gi, we were very involved with the on the mat OTM tournaments, and Chris would ref and I would compete and he would compete. And so it was something that we were doing, you know, every other month or so for several years. And that was most of my competition, I would say, was probably no-gi. And so therefore, whenever I was competing no-gi, I wanted to train no-gi. So I did. We used to do a lot of no-gi. We used to be young people. We used to train all the time. It was a thing.
Yeah.
It was a thing.
I'm like, I distinctly remember, like back in the olden days, we kind of weren't really allowed to do no-gi until you were a purple belt, because the old theory is you want to learn the art first, the conservative art, and then apply it to other applications. Nowadays, people do exclusively no-gi. But I remember being a purple belt and finally rolling no-gi, and one of the Brazilians was trying to pass my guard. He was like one weight a class ahead, and I suddenly realized how hard it was for him to pass the way he normally does, because he holds my legs. And I could almost and I would invert and I would twirl and all this. And I see why, especially purple belts, start falling in love with no-gi, because it really equalizes you against the upper belts.
Yeah.
And then I remember realizing as an aging a black belt one time, rolling with the guy who I normally rolled gi, was a blue belt. Nogi, I would had a hell of a time passing his guard because he moves and he rolls around. And the first roll, you have the best control, and then after a while, you're greased pigs. It's the sweat factor and the slippery. It's like, fuck.
He thinks it's gross. That's why he doesn't like doing it anymore.
It is kind of gross.
Yeah.
I feel like one thing that I think about is when I'm training in gi, I actually try to avoid like gripping, because I feel like if I could do it in the gi, I could probably just take the gi off and do it without the gi. And like, I try to make my game such that it doesn't really matter.
I used to agree with that, but then I sort of changed and went, fight the fight you're in. If it's a no-gi fight, take advantage of the fact there aren't grips.
I see.
If it's a gi fight, go ahead and grip. I mean, I don't know. For years, I had that mode. Like, I want to have this adaptable gi game that'll work well. Am I then creating a blurry gi game and a blurry no-gi? Or definitely pull them apart.
Yeah.
When I fight no-gi, I am going to take advantage of the slipperiness.
Yeah.
And when I fight gi, I'm going to take advantage of the grip and the stickiness.
Well, I kind of think that it's like a training tool. If you do it sometimes I'm going to only use no-gi grips even though we're wearing a gi.
Yeah.
And probably if I had 100 hours a week to train, it wouldn't matter. But if I only train a few times a week and I'm going to a place where everybody's wearing a gi, I could ask the person, hey, let's take off our gis so we can practice no-gi.
Right.
But if that's not the case, then maybe I just personally decide that in this role, I'm going to work on using no-gi grips, And because a lot of people tend to, like we've talked about many times, I feel like in the last month, humans were so hand oriented and we tend to just use our grips so much overly, more than we need to.
More than we need to,
and not focus on where the power really is, which is in our hips and our core and our mobility, and that the grips are backing up what the hips are doing, like all those types of things that I really think it's grossly important to not just focus on grips.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like as I've aged, and like I didn't one day come up with this and then every roll after, but starting around 50-ish, I knew I had to change my game. That I could still roll pretty hard, and then I'm coming in and I'm sore, I'm limping, and I hate this, right? So how do I adapt, right? And but jiu-jitsu is the art of adaptation. How do I adapt to my aging body? And one of the things I did was mentally, my goal when I roll is no longer to win. My goal is to see if I can spend less energy than my opponent, no matter what, and be as technical as I possibly can. And if I win as a result of that, great. And if I lose, great too.
Yeah.
But never be the one who's more exhausted. And that alone just like changed the total style of the game. Yeah. If I feel like I'm tired and he's not, I'm rolling wrong. Whether I'm winning or losing, I have to be the one spending the least amount of energy. Yeah. Then it forces me to have the most technical game out of that roll.
It's funny, I've seen you do that because I've like been exhausted rolling with you, and then you like turn around and roll with someone else, and I'm like, oh, how's he doing that? Like you roll with like 3 people, then you'll like roll with me for a long time, and then you'll just turn around and roll with someone else. Yeah. And like some super tough guy. Yeah. I'm like, holy shit, how's this guy do that?
But jiu-jitsu should not be my exercise. Yeah. I should cross train. I should swim, run hills, all that. If I want cardio training, I should do that. If I want strength training, I should do weights.
I totally feel that.
But he doesn't want any of that.
I know, me neither. I hate doing that kind of work.
I love it. Personally, I really enjoy strength training.
It's hard for me to show up.
Yeah, but like if it's something that you really love, then you would think you would do it, right? And I mean, I love it because I find it meditative, but I also know the benefits on my body, and I feel like I can't afford to not do it. And I unfortunately was plagued with chronic knee injuries in my 30s. Chronic knee injuries. I had like 9 knee injuries that were kind of debilitating. between 30 and 39. Like it was every year.
And
I was hurting
your
my
ankle
knee.
broken.
And I had my ankle broken. And I had my kidney
kidney,
smashed.
yeah.
And I have severe neck arthritis. Like I was really doing a lot. So then, now, years later at 45, it's like I feel like I can't afford not to do PT style rehab on a regular basis. And like I like to, move my body. And I'm sure you guys move your body. Well, I know you don't do anything besides jiu-jitsu. Do you do anything besides jiu-jitsu that moves your body?
I
And judo?
like to pretend that I do engage in those things, but it's not frequent enough.
Yeah.
I definitely feel that like my fitness level will like stay the same or even like decrease. And like I'll train a bunch and I'll just get like achy and sore from training, like worn out. So like it's like almost like my nervous system is shot, but my fitness level like hasn't changed. And Jack was mentioning that to me the other day. He's like, dude, you no longer get your cardio from training.
No.
Yeah.
So efficient
Yeah.
that like you need to go get it somewhere else.
You do.
He was telling me, and I was like,
You
that
have
makes sense.
But at
The
the
only-
same time, like I've seen and read and done things that like just walking the dog is like enough cardio. Like how much cardio does one really need?
Yeah.
We need to be pushing ourselves as we're advancing in age. I'm not talking about young competitive athletes. I
Right.
totally understand getting breathless and pushing to the max and doing all that kind of stuff and
Yep.
preparing for matches and all that kind of stuff. But at my age, do I need to push myself to the point of breathlessness, or am I increasing my risk for heart attack?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or cortisol spikes or hormone imbalances or, like you said, injury.
Yeah. Like my
But we need a
warm-ups.
doctor to come on.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'll get you in.
Like the 2 to 3 classes a week I teach, I do warm-ups. And there was a period of time where I didn't.
Yeah.
And that's when my injuries happened. But anyways,
Who told you to do warm-ups?
you did about 8 years ago. And I added that. And the warm-ups always have a run as a start. We run around with the mat. And I always say that the first self-defense thing is know how to run.
Sure.
Have at least a quarter mile where you can do a pretty brisk run.
Yeah.
And then we reverse it, and then we warm up arms, then neck, then legs, and then a core thing where you do body twists or crunches.
That's good.
And then sometimes afterwards, like after I'm done rolling, I run over the weight rack and I pump some squats out and some things just because it's legs, lungs, and core.
Yeah.
Like what we do, I don't need to do curls or any of that stuff.
I do because I like to have nice arms.
Def, you like high def on the guns?
I need to do curls.
I'm always surprised at how my legs get sore training. Like how
Legs, lungs, and core are the key.
trying to triangle people.
With the cross train, yeah. And
Well, even just holding your legs up like this.
Yes.
Think about this is a workout.
that's a workout.
Just
Yep.
doing that.
Holding up the leg. And I think, like, so in my theory of my combat base model, there's street art and sport. So what is the art? The art is how do I control and submit my opponent utilizing the least amount of attributes and athletics and the maximum amount of skill, knowledge, cunningness, and guile. That's the art. The sport is how do I deploy that art within the man-made rules of the game, utilizing all my athletics and attributes. So that's a yin and yang there, right? Two opposite approaches. So what I do is when I roll, I distinctly tell myself I am rolling right now, maybe for even a whole month. I'm art rolling. I'm not rolling I'm actively trying to not use athletics and attributes. And for a while, I was pretty fast and I had some good natural athletics. I have strong lungs and all that, but I don't want to rely on that.
Yeah.
Because when I'm 10 years older, I'm not going to have that. So I'm training for the 69-year-old Chris Haueter. That's who I'm training for, not trying to force myself to being 49.
Well, and then by default, you're preserving the 59-year-old Chris Haueter by not jacking yourself up, trying to train
Pretending
like
I'm
you're 10
30
years
yeah.
younger than you are. Yeah, which makes sense.
God, I'm getting old.
I was thinking like another thing, like where people come to jiu-jitsu, and I almost feel like most people come where you're like striving to be like Mads Burnell.
Yeah.
You know, like that's like the original vision that people have is I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah.
To get these skills. I'm going to be a badass. I'm going to be a killer.
Watching MMA draws you in. Watching action movies draws us into this art. Yep.
But it's like, I feel like it's so much more than that. Like the whole thing's a metamorphosis, obviously. Like you kind of go through these different changes the whole time through. But like, the interesting thing is like jiu-jitsu doesn't have that like after being that killer, like what do you become? Because there isn't a lot of old heads that have like gone through it. Like I go to judo class and there's like 6 or 7 dudes like in their 70s and 80s.
Oh, wow.
Like on the mat, you know, coral bell.
I don't know how the judo guys do it. All that.
And they don't do it is how they do it.
They're mostly instruct.
They instruct, they contribute, they're on the mat, they do some of the exercises, they do the warm-ups. Every once in a while, they'll grab like a trustworthy lower belt and like move around with them. So they do what they can, it seems like. Yeah. And what keeps them engaged in it and keeps them contributing. But I don't feel like jiu-jitsu really like quite has that. And I actually feel
maybe it will though, because, okay, so the whole thing about jiu-jitsu is it's highly evolved from the time when Chris started. It was only young, athletic men. Yeah. Now it's moms, it's older people, it's whoever. I did not start jiu-jitsu thinking I was going to be Mads Burnell. I started jiu-jitsu thinking, God, this is a good outlet for my anger and my emotional issues and to learn how to do these things. I've always been really feisty and it's just a good like outlet. And I've always wanted to do something like this. It wasn't because I wanted to learn self-defense. It wasn't because of any of those kind of issues where you hear the typical person walking in the door. And as we attract more and more people who aren't the typical, you know, self-defense or think I'm going to be a badass person, you know, I feel like I became a badass and I didn't even expect that was ever going to happen. It was like, oh, I actually have some skills now. This is interesting. That
it wasn't your goal; it was a result.
It was a result, yeah. And I think that's probably more and more common as we get different types of people coming in the door.
Yep.
You know, than like your typical young, tough, athletic male.
Yeah.
And so possibly Chris and I have had this discussion. Like, will we roll in 10 years?
Yeah.
Will we keep doing this? If this wasn't our job, would we be doing this still? You know, and I'm seeing that I've seen a few people on the sides of the mat who don't really train anymore, who still participate and contribute.
And they kind of teach. And
they enjoy the community and they enjoy being able to still be involved at some level in the thing that they gave their entire lives to. Yeah. So maybe Chris and I will be that person one day. We may.
I mean, I utilize Rickson as my role model. Like I see him like once every other month, and his approach is he's a coach, he's a mentor. We do some isolated little sparring, like just till one person opens the guard or until one person stands up. You know, and so he still gets his training, and he's still a student. He'll like go, oh, wait, how do you do that? And then he'll see and go, yeah, I like that, but I think this is a better way. And so it's still analyzing the art in that essence of I'm always trying to figure out how to improve, to become more efficient at whatever I do without athletics. And that's the key.
I kind of feel like you, John Jock, Rickson, like this group of guys are like those, you're like at the top of the age bracket of people that have been in jiu-jitsu for a long time. And you're the ones like, as far as like leading the pack into the, what the older person's jiu-jitsu looks like. Yeah. You guys are the guys that are like figuring that out.
Yeah.
Right? Where I'm saying like, I go to judo and I see it. And I can even tell some of the other students that are my age that have been in judo for a long time, they kind of already are taking on those roles, right? Like they're not training as much at my age and they're like becoming administrators and they're like helping with the community stuff.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, you can tell that they see that role ahead and they're like starting to fill it. You know, whereas like, I don't think you have someone to look at really and go like, oh, that's what's coming. So it seems like this dilemma that you have, where you're kind of trying to figure it out. And it's an important thing.
For me, he's that perfect role model.
Yeah.
And he's my role model. So there you go.
Yeah,
Because Rickson's older than Chris and Chris is older than me. And, you know, and so like I listened what he did when he turned 50. He turned 50 9 years ago.
Yeah.
9 years ago.
Sounds like yesterday.
How old was I 9 years ago?
I don't know.
30 something.
How old were you 10 years ago?
35. So I was 36 9 years ago. You know, I was still young. That's young. I was still competing and doing all kinds of stuff, you know.
And my game then with you was boring.
Yeah, I was like, why don't you move? Oh my God, it's all coming back now. Like used to say, why don't you move? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? How come I beat you up so easy? And then the last few years, I had a hip problem. Started with a groin pull while rolling with Chris in COVID.
Yeah.
Do you know that? I got a groin pull while rolling with Chris in COVID, and my hip has never been the same.
Yeah,
because
I
we
feel
only
like
trained with each other in COVID. We had 2 other guys that would come by the house once in a while, and it was me and Chris. My groin got pulled really bad, and my hip has never been the same. I've lost so much mobility in my leg.
I feel like that was my fault.
It's not your fault. It's just something that happened. And, you know, and I have like this kidney thing, and like, so now everything feels like it's falling apart, and I'm not even 50, 45. It's not fair.
It's all my fault. I'm bringing you to Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah, it's all your fault. You destroyed my life. But I probably would have been so angry and, you know, and anxious. Like Jiu Jitsu's helped me with a lot of emotional kind of trauma and having an outlet. And also physically, because when I started, I was a smoker. I was didn't eat well. I was overweight. And so like working out, like I wouldn't have had that drive to continue to work out to stay healthy before this.
Yeah.
I didn't have that.
I think it's really hard to have, when your goal in any physical thing is vanity, I call it as a goal. That's a hard goal to maintain. You either have to be really vain, or your job is being a bodybuilder or an actor. Like I can't have the goal to look good. To me, just won't work. No. It's just not that important.
I like looking good.
We all do. But that exclusively as a goal doesn't make me want to work out. What makes me want to work out is, oh, I might need this for the street altercation, for the sport match I have in a month, for just rolling at the end of class. I don't want to be out of breath. I don't want to be weak. I want to be able to stand up in that strong leg guy's guard. It's like I always have a goal other than how I'm going to look or even feel when I cross train.
I like feeling good too.
I like the feelings of the movements. That's what I think I'm attracted to. Is like when you've decided like this is a good movement, and then you start to like do it like smoothly. That's the feeling that I think I go for, that I like.
And even like when you lift, and while you lift, you think about the art. I like how, like if I'm curling a weight here, that's like, and I'm hearing a song, whatever, like that's not how I want to lift. I want to actually feel my whole body, because I don't want to escape arm bars like this.
Yeah.
I'm going to escape arm bars turning my body. Yeah. So as I hold the weight, I'm going to do everything oriented towards what I do. And like, I remember being young, watching when I think it was Marvin Hagler was going up a weight class, and he had to add pounds. And the way he would lift is not, like this. He would go all the way down to extend range and do everything with the impact of the movement of throwing a shot. And from then on, I've always done, whenever I lift, I'd have some bodybuilder come, you're not lifting right. Your body mechanics are wrong. I think, no, yours are wrong, because mine are oriented towards martial arts.
Mm.
So when I extend a leg, I'm imagining a hook and extending a leg in a sweep. I want everything. So even if I'm only on a knee joint, I want to feel like in reality, my hip would be assisting. Oh, I feel where my hip now, where I use my quad instead of what I should use. So now I'm going to switch on this other machine and feel that quad.
But at the same time, for the aging athlete, it might be beneficial to train the muscles that you don't use in jiu-jitsu so that you can walk.
Very true.
That's kind of like what I'm after.
You need the counterbalance.
Is doing the counterbalance. And then in jiu-jitsu, we tend to lean towards a certain side for a lot of movements. Most of us have preferences in stance and whatever. So I find it very important to like be working primarily like split squats, deadlift type motion, stuff like that, working for my upper back and opening up my chest, because in jiu-jitsu we're usually hunched over. So like a lot of these counter movements, and especially like neck stretches for my arthritis, there's like so many different things that I feel like need to be applied kind of more in a traditional way. Like whereas when I was competitive, I would do what Chris is saying, because he was my coach, and he would tell me, this is how we're curling into the arm lock every time, grab it, blah, blah, blah. And so that was fine for that time. But it's like different versions of a human. I'm a different woman now I don't really do that anymore.
And I love how Allison corrects our posture. Because I don't want to walk around all hunched over as a grappler.
Yeah.
I want to extend my neck and pull my shoulders back and do the opposite of what we are in grappling all the time, right?
What was it? Pescoço? Big neck?
Big neck?
No, they said?
Something like that.
Yeah. Pescoço.
Big your neck. Come on. Come on. Let's see your big neck.
In the early days, was there any older people around in the martial arts that you were doing?
The Machado's actually their first black belt. When he was an MD, and he was in his 70s when he got his black belt. I can't remember his name.
Like, got it before you? American?
Yeah,
Brazilian.
American.
So he's one of the Dirty Dozen?
That he's
nobody knows about it?
Listed. Nobody knows about it.
We just made a whole huge revelation about the Dirty Dozen. It's all wrong, guys.
Dirty 13.
Oh, I know.
13.
Honestly, like that.
The Dirty Dozen's all messed up.
Oh, and that's I've known that
messed.
From the day they wrapped it around me. I knew that like maybe I shouldn't say this publicly, but yeah, that's kind of all bullshit. Because in Brazil,
your whole life is bullshit, Chris Haueter.
In Brazil, there are older athletes who are ranked amongst their peers.
Yeah.
I was the first American black belt adult division guy. Not the first, but amongst that group, right? But there are people that weren't ranked against that, because back in the olden days, in order to advance a belt, you had to hold your own and or beat the current belt you're in. That means you're the next belt, which is why it's absurd to have a 2-time blue belt world champion where, I won the pans and the world's like, that means you're a fucking purple belt.
Yeah.
And because if in the sporting aspect of this, we split it apart by age groups, and the only Olympic age group that matters is adult. And the only belt that matters is black. So everything ultimately is practice for black belt adult division. You're purple, you're brown, it's all training. And you see, through that as a martial artist, I realized that's training too. It's all training. None of it is not for the purpose of training. When you think street, train art, practice sport, then none of them become a singular goal.
You switch that up. Think street, train sport.
Think street, train sport, practice. Yeah.
We got it. So when I was new, the oldest person that I would see on the mat was Guru Dan.
Yes.
He was the oldest person, Guru Dan Inosando.
Yep.
He's how old now?
Gosh, he's in his late 70s, I want to say. No, that's right. I think
You're 59. You're almost 60. So is he 20 years older than you?
yeah,
He's probably 80.
yeah,
Back
he's in
then,
his
he was
80s.
like 60. And I would think, oh, wow, that's one older guy, but he's guru down.
And he's still teaching and training.
Yeah.
Wait, so that MD guy that you said got
Yeah.
this black belt, was he like, because I have this notion that like all jiu-jitsu prior to me was like dog eat dog, like kill or be killed, like this super tough situation. So was that guy super tough at 70 years old as an MD?
No,
Bang out hard rounds with him, and that's how he got promoted?
no, that was when I realized that there, and like I remember Horion told me pretty early on that not everybody gets but to be a black belt. But then realizing at the same time that there's this non-athletic type of guy that gets to be a black belt. Or back then, sometimes.
Maybe, if they like him.
If they like him.
Yeah,
Again,
maybe
that's
if
the
he pays
politics of
money
it.
for private lessons. Who knows?
That's the politics of it. And there were guys who should have, could have, would have got their belt the same week I did, but for whatever reason, they'd pissed off their instructor's wife. There's political reasons always. Like there's always politics, right?
Yeah, we get a lot of people that join our organization at brown belt or even at black belt because they've got into some kind of situation.
Yes.
And then we've had people leave us
Yep.
at brown belt or black belt because they don't like the way that we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, it's like everybody has flaws. It's kind of like being married.
Yeah.
Like everybody has flaws. You just have to be with somebody whose flaws you can tolerate.
Yep.
It's the same thing when you're getting into a relationship with jiu-jitsu instructors and coaches and
Yes.
I feel like you have to be able to like tolerate their flaws and know, okay, yeah, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And it's a world where, I mean, martial arts as a whole are a power trip.
Yeah.
And the reality of combat sports have a humbling effect because of the meritocracy involved. Like, even if you are the best, there's always somebody someday, some point can beat you. So it humbles you. And the fantasy arts don't have that.
Really?
They don't have that built-in laboratory that it's not now I know an armbar. It's did my armbar work that day, that roll against them?
Yeah.
And there's always somebody who can beat you. Always. And I think that's the healthy part. The unhealthy aspects come in when you are one of the top dogs and you're still insecure knowing that, so you pick on the guy down below you because that guy on top picked on you. That creates an unhealthy type of hierarchy. And that's not just with grappling, with the power trip of being able to, I will promote you when I'm ready to, right? And regardless of what you think you are in skills. No, I'm the one who gets to wrap a belt around you. Then it's a leash.
Yeah.
But the belt can become a leash. And sort of the black belt is almost the removal of that leash. It's less like the other belts. Like if you're a purple belt, you're at one school under one guy, even if you want to change, belt wise, that's probably going to set you back. Or this school will promise you if you do change, we're going to bump you up a belt. So that's the politics of it. And that's with that. That's the inter-school politics within the
chasers.
Yep.
But that's also just really unhealthy from both sides because to me, the healthy version is pursuing the knowledge. And belts happen.
The pure.
It's pure.
The belt happens.
The belt happens. The knowledge is what we're after. So all that doesn't matter. And really, it's more like when you're looking where you're going to train, is it a good vibe or not? Because if it's not a good vibe, you don't want to stay there.
Yeah.
And because you've had that experience.
Around.
And I've been around places where it's like, yeah, nice to drop by, but I don't think I want to be part of this herd.
Yeah. 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 And it's funny because a lot of people just stumble in, right? They don't really know what they're looking for. It's not till you become like a purple belt that you really know.
But the corner, it was near me. I heard that scene. I'm going to do it.
And you don't know anything about it.
No.
So you start, and it's not until a few years later that you're like, oh, this is what's going on. Like you kind of finally understand what's happening. You start to see all this stuff. You start to feel it out. And then you're kind of like, oh, some people might kind of get there and go like, I'm not sure this is the right situation, you know?
The right fit.
Well, it's like people will ask Chris or myself about recommendations for where they should train. Yeah. And I always say, I think it's a really personal thing. If you have multiple schools in the area, drop in at all the places, check out the vibe, see if it's something that you're looking for your personal place where you're at in your life.
Yeah. And goals.
Yeah.
Is your goal, and we've had them here in the garage, still often in the garage, their goal, they're young, they want to get their black belt, get some accomplishments, and open up a school. And that's like something that would attract you to Gracie Torrance. Because it's like, do you want to open up Steve's Charbroiled Hamburgers, or do you want to open up McDonald's? And know that I'm going to have a line no matter what. I might not make the best burger, but I'm definitely going to make money.
Yes.
And I can understand why one would do that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure if I opened up a Gracie school and I called Huron and Henner and said, hey, I want to join your whole thing, they'd be happy. They'd say, sure, we'll help you. But it wouldn't be my school.
You have to give them a percentage.
I would give them a percentage.
And you'd have to pass their instructor certification process, which you probably wouldn't pass because you probably don't know exactly how they want all that.
I looked at when I first started looking at their curriculum, I looked at what it took to get a blue belt and the test that they give. And I know everything that's on there just from being around, obviously I knew every single move, but they showed an example of what your technique should not look like. And I was kind of oh man, some of that looks fine to me. And I was like, damn, these guys got to know a lot. There's a lot of stuff
they do
that you need to know. But you've said that Rickson tells you that some of it you can't spell out like that.
Well, it's like
you have to feel it, do it.
When me and three other guys are with Rickson, and there's always one of them who asks, hey, I learned this at the GU program, or that, what Rickson tells me all the time, which I heard from him 10 years ago, is don't look for the steps of the move. Look for the essence and the connection.
Yeah.
That's what's important.
Yes.
Not whether your wrist was here or here.
Yeah. To me, it's I feel like people are different and they need different things. And there's a need for some people to have that kind of approach, right? Yeah. But the approach that we've had, that Chris has, is much more based on performance and on what works for you. Yeah. And as a coach, anybody that I've ever coached, I don't tell people they're wrong. I say, this is the way that I do it.
Yeah.
And maybe that won't work for you and your body, but this is how I do it. And if it isn't working for you, let's try to troubleshoot and find a way that is going to work for you and your body. So I feel like this is such a personalized thing that I could never grade somebody based on a test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's unique and individual. Yeah. So it's different philosophy.
But it's there also is a knowledge component where you do have to know a certain amount of stuff.
It's like chess. You have to know how each piece moves.
Yeah.
Or you cannot play for the game. Yeah. But I use an analogy a lot. Let's say you want to play tennis.
Yeah.
And you went to a place where you learned how to serve, how to charge the net all the time, but you rarely or never played tennis. Yeah. And when you did, it was only with others who drill all the time and don't actually ever play.
Yeah.
I might go to you for knowledge to help my serve, but not to help my game.
Yeah.
And then you put it against the person who plays bad tennis.
Right. But plays all the time.
Yeah. Constantly working on timing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And when you put those two people in a match,
the guy who plays all the time wins.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because similar to like when I was training with Mads and I started to think about like, oh, you shouldn't be on bottom. And I like kind of adapted that mindset and started to train like that. Like when I go train with Henner, I feel like he's like this Rolodex or like a computer of information. Like,
Yeah.
every single thing he does is like, it's like he plucked out a card,
Yep.
the card and did the move. Like,
Mhm.
and he moves like that. Like
He's technical, very technical, super technical.
So now my brain, when I'm training with him, I'm like, oh, like I'm in a spot right now where I don't have like a specific thing that I do. I know that I'm like trying to get my back to the mat, trying to get this arm over my head and like trying to do a little spasmodics to get out of here. Like it like makes me aware of those spots. So I feel like it's just interesting when you pick up other people's strengths and you kind of,
Yeah.
this is an interesting thing that can add to me if I just think a little bit more like that, and it's neat.
Yeah, and it's a balance. And I in my formative years and during my competition years, I found it extremely helpful to drill technique over and over and over and over again and practice with, different combinations and different situations and, with light resistance, blah, 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 and put all this time and effort and energy into that, into developing the jiu-jitsu that I have now. Now, who I am is I like to just try to be in the moment and feel it.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately it's where you are in your life,
Yep. Yeah.
where you are in your development, what you're focusing on. And I lately, it hasn't been as much about learning more techniques as it is about learning how to roll in the body that I have now. That's my learning.
Yeah.
Is how do I still stay on the mat with the immobility issues and body issues that I have. I think that that's where I've completely channeled all of my learning.
Yeah.
And maybe one day I'll be able to go back to classes again and learn things in that way again. But for now, it's all about how do I continue to roll on the mat with a different body?
Well, and I really like the online stuff that you guys put together with the Combat Base Club.
Oh, thanks.
Well, because you do have like a curriculum that you're putting together, like Melissa's Funhouse stuff, where someone can watch and go like, oh, these are the basic things I need to know. And then they can watch like all the other instructionals and go like, oh, and here's like the street fighting stuff I need to think about. And it just like seems like a good mix of all the stuff, right?
Yes.
Where you can kind of get like,
It's a
teaching in a way and you teaching in a way. And it's like a good,
but compared to some places, it's definitely a looser curriculum. But compared to like what I call the meat grinder schools, which are oriented towards some form of a competition.
Yeah.
Whether it's MMA, IBJ, JF, there's like a system in which that school passes guard. Maybe 2 or 3 systems. A system in which they play a guard to get their sweep or their lock. And most of the guys in that school will be really good at that system.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah. So for me, probably for about 10 years, mostly I would have little classes back here. And over the course of that time, I did develop a curriculum. So on our combatbase.com membership site, we have Melissa's Funhouse, where my idea was to go through that curriculum, which is like 6 pages long, and just go through each thing.
Yeah.
And it's my topics, but then when Chris comes in or Jim comes in, other people add their perspective, it expands it. And I really think that it's going to be a magical experience and give us a lot of material to work with.
It is
a long time.
I like that class a lot. And the
Melissa's Funhouse is fun.
You were on there too before.
Yeah,
you contributed
been in that.
a couple times.
I want to do more.
We need your judo in there more too. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I think is cool is like those old street fighting videos. Like,
oh, those are funny. Yeah.
I think Chris is so cute and so like little and like, well, you grab his collar.
Cringe.
My name's Chris Haueter. And
I think that's amazing.
So cute. It's
Cringe.
so sweet. He's so like now he's like, hi, my name's Chris Haueter. When I met him, he wasn't even like that. He was more like that little guy in the video.
Cringe.
And that was just 20-some years ago.
Cringe.
28, 22. Why were you so self-hating back then? You were so cute and sweet.
I don't know.
And like less loud.
Like, so like I use analogies for this all the time. The water analogy I love. The language analogy I love. And one of the best analogies I like is that of music, right? So if you want to do music, you have to learn how to play the instrument. That's going to require some step 1, step 2, step 3, or you can't play. Are there people who just naturally kind of learn on
Elton John?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are those who have natural acuity, those who don't. But what we have in it is most people don't make their own songs.
Mm.
They are cover bands.
That's true.
And when I cover,
Yeah.
I want to cover the best Rickson I can, the best Jean-Jacques I can, the best Keegan-style pressure passing I can. Then I'm playing the cover band.
Uh-huh.
But I want to create my own music and take elements of all those and make my own songs too, right? And then that own song, if it becomes popular enough, becomes something that people attempt to cover.
Yeah.
Which brings back what is original art, right?
Yeah.
And that's that whole thing. There are cover bands out there that are technically better than the original band in terms of their tightness, their skill, their range of hitting the voice, all that. So,
Well, hip hop music is like composed out of other music,
sampling.
right? It's all sampled, right?
Yep.
All right, so what is going on with Combat Base this month? Well, actually, May 3rd through 5th, we have our big camp where Chris
Yes.
and myself and Darian Tobin are going to be teaching. Chris will be doing 2.5 seminars. That's 2.5 full-length seminars. I'm going to teach a yoga class, a women's only section, and a class on arm bars. Darian's going to come in with striking and a class for the school owners in attendance. So it's just going to be a great time. In general, we're going to do social things as well, like a night out at the local casino.
It's in Reno, Nevada.
We're going to head over to Lake Tahoe for an afternoon and have lunch, things like that. So it should be a great time. But in addition to that, we have new gear on the website. Some of Chris's more influential quotes, like "It's not who's good, it's who's left," and "Think street, train sport, practice art." New gear, new hats. We have rash guards. We have board shorts, all kinds of stuff at combatbase.com. And if you're interested in Jiu Jitsu instruction, we have the opportunity to join the Combat Base Club and watch videos that we're updating constantly online. We have 100 plus videos available for members only, as well as a monthly Zoom Q&A session with us where we will answer any questions that you have. You can submit the questions ahead of time, and then we'll go over the answers during the session.
If you want structure, we provide that. If you want structure without being controlled, we provide that as well.
Yeah, a lot of people are unaware that we are actually an organization with many different academies that join us. And Chris goes out to their academies, does seminars, promotes people in their rank. We have the ability to sign off on paperwork for our students for different competitions that they might want to participate in. So we really are running a full organization that we would say has the least amount of control and the most amount of support that we can offer to people and what they're looking for in their personal journey, rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. We're really trying to cater to the needs of the individual person or individual academy. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. Combatbase.com. Check it out. Sign up for our mailing list.
And go ahead and search Combat Base in the YouTube channel, and you're going to find videos of me that aren't the Combat Base YouTube channel. So like and subscribe to Combat Base YouTube channel. Even though I don't put out a lot of stuff, it helps my algorithm.
But I think this is going to go on there.
Combat Base YouTube channel.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Don't forget.
Nice, guys.
Woo!
We did it. That was good.